Everywhere I go, I got my mind stayed on freedom. Everywhere I go, I got my mind stayed on freedom. Everywhere I go, I got my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Whoa. Over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. 'Cause I'm gonna fight to the death to be free. Whoa, freedom, whoa, freedom, whoa, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. 'Cause I'm gonna fight to the death to be free. Spirit of Harriet, Spirit of Harriet, Spirit of Harriet over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. And I'm gonna fight to the death to be free. Teachings of Malcolm, teachings of Malcolm, teachings of Malcolm over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. 'Cause I'm gonna use any means necessary. And I'm gonna leave my people so freedom. 'Cause I'm gonna fight to the death to be free. Spirit of Jose, Spirit of Jose, Spirit of Jose over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. 'Cause I'm gonna follow the sacred way. And I'm gonna use it. And I'm gonna use any means necessary. I'm gonna use any means necessary. I'm gonna fight to the death. I'm gonna fight to the death. I'm gonna fight to the death to be free. Oh, yeah. Freedom. Yeah. Whoa. Whoa, freedom. Yeah. Whoa, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried. 'cause we're gonna fight to the death. 'Cause we're gonna fight to the death. 'Cause we're gonna fight to the death to be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. 'Cause I'm gonna follow the sacred way. And I'm gonna lead my people to freedom. And I'm gonna use any means necessary. And I'm gonna lead my people to freedom. Fight to the death. I'm gonna fight to the death. And I'm gonna fight to the death to be free.
Beautiful, Baba Jeff. You had to go way back to find that. Goodness.
Fantastic.
Beautiful.
Stone was in fine voice.
Outstanding.
Yes, indeed.
Grand Rising. Grand Rising, and welcome to Wose Community of the Sacred African Way. Welcome this morning. As we begin, I'd like to point out the book of Ankashanki in the Hosea. On page 64, it reminds us to serve God that he may protect you. Serve your mother and father that you may go forward and prosper. It also speaks more to direct service. It says, serve a wise person that they may serve you. Serve your brothers and sisters that you may have a good reputation. Serve one who serves you. Serve any person that you may benefit from it. I see Mama Fanya and Sister Jalea will be leading us in affirmation.
We'll say affirmation. We will know God's truth to be free and self-determined.
Creator, help us to remember the humanity, glory, and suffering of our ancestors, and to honor the struggles of our elders.
Let us strive to bring new visions and new life to our people. Let there be peace and harmony among us.
Let us be loving, sharing, and creative. Let us work, study, and listen so we may learn, teach, and cultivate self-reliance.
Grant us power, O Holy One, as we struggle to resurrect our hearts and our homeland.
We will raise our children according to the needs of our nation with discipline, patience, devotion, and courage. We will strive to be the living models of the new direction of our people.
We are an African people.
We are children of God. Ashe.
Ashe. And thank you. And thank you. We have Baba Jeff. Oh, no, Sounds of Ma'at is here with us today. Or Baba Jeff, you have one of their recordings? Great.
Who we are us. It's not who we are to us. Who we are to us. It's not who we are to us. The weather is changing, you can tell it when you step in the room. The static was building, the light was going to consume. So hold your hand close, you're waiting to stand in your truth. Could be slack on the backbone of jail, running down the you. Building, standing, a vision, and planning, can't be divided, too black to unite. Best way to be us, how to free us. This one's for the ancestors. Building, standing, a vision, and planning, can't be divided, too black to unite. Best way to be us, how to free us. This one's for the ancestors. It's about who we are to us. Who we are to us. Are you slack on the backbone of jet, ride or die, my kangaroo? Building, standing, vision, planning, can't be divided, too black, too united. Best way to be us, how to free us. This one's for the ancestors. Building, standing, vision, planning, can't be divided, too black, too united. Best way to be us, how to free us. This one's for the ancestors. It's about who we are, us. Who we are, us. It's about who we are, us. All our power is in what we think, feel, do. All our power is in what we think, feel, do. All our power is in what we think, feel, do. Government structure. All our power is in what we think, feel, do. When you reach the crossroads, you know that your moment has come. If you choose a route, then your battle is already won. So take your position different ways to stand in your truth. Ah, you slack on the backbone of jet, ride or die like a rule. Who we are, us. It's about who we are, us. Who we are, us. It's about who we are, us. All our power is in what we think, feel, do. All our power is in what we think, feel, do. All our power is in what we think, feel, do. All our power is in what we think, feel, do.
Outstanding. Sounds of my art. David Goodlett, Latrice Love in the house. And now, with our spirits up, we will head into our historical tribute. Minister Rana is bringing us an historical tribute today.
Hatep Wazeh, Amen Ra Hatep. I am joining you from Querétaro, Mexico, and I am hopeful and prayerful that everything will last. There are so many church bells going on around me consistently. They sound wonderful, and there they go. And there's also a dog, I think next door somewhere, so I'm just dealing with all of it, but here we go. My historical tribute today is someone that you probably have not heard of. We like to bring forward people that we both have and have not heard of. It gives us an opportunity to learn more about someone we might be familiar with, or to do a little bit of research into someone we might not be. So let's go. This is the story of Mary Lumpkin, the formerly enslaved woman who liberated a slave jail and turned it into an HBCU. Shango's ears just went, hmm? Okay. For many years, Mary Lumpkin was forced to bear her enslaver's children and help him run his jail. But when he died and left the property to her, she helped turn the prison into a school for Black students. This story is by Genevieve Carlton. It was published September 6, 2022. Around 1840, an enslaved child, Mary, was sold to a man, Robert Lumpkin. He forced her to bear his children and help him run a slave in Richmond, Virginia. In the end, however, Mary Lumpkin turned his prison into a school for Black students. Before the Civil War, slave jails were sites of confinement and torture for enslaved men, women, and children who tried to escape to free states or who were waiting to be sold. However, few were as notorious as Lumpkin's jail. Mary Lumpkin witnessed the horrors that Robert put his prisoners through on a daily basis. When she inherited the jail upon Robert's death, she immediately shut it down and leased it to a minister who wanted to establish a seminary for freed men. Today, that school is Virginia Union University. This is the story of how one enslaved woman helped turn a slave jail into one of the first historically Black colleges in the United States. Who was Mary Lumpkin? Not much is actually known about Mary Lumpkin's early life, but according to Smithsonian Magazine, she was born in 1832. She was described as fair-faced and nearly white, and she may have been the child of an enslaved woman and her enslaver. Robert Lumpkin purchased Mary at some point in the late 1830s or early 1840s, when she was still a child. By the time Mary was 13, Mary Lumpkin had already given birth to the first of Robert's children, and she would go on to have at least 4 more. Robert was 27 years older than Mary. Robert, who was 27 years older than Mary, bought the slave jail in the Shockoe Bottom area of Richmond, Virginia in 1844. It became known as Lumpkin's Jail, and it was one of the cruelest prisons in the South. Some even called it the Devil's Half Acre. As Mary Lumpkin continued to bear Robert's children, she reportedly told him that he could treat her however he wanted, as long as their kids remained free. It seems that Robert agreed. He even sent their 2 daughters, who were reportedly white passing, to a finishing school in Massachusetts at Mary's urging. Smithsonian Magazine reports that Charles Henry Corey, a former chaplain for the Union Army, claimed that Robert sent his daughters to school because he worried that a financial contingency might arise when these, his own beautiful daughters, might be sold into slavery to pay his debts. This, of course, terrified Robert because he knew that they may be treated the same way that he had treated Black prisoners who came through his jail. Okay. Mary Lumpkin's life on the Devil's Half Acre. There are several surviving contemporary accounts from enslaved men who were imprisoned at Lumpkin's jail, and some of them even mention Mary. According to the Washington Post, a reverend named A.M. Newman recalled being sent to the jail as punishment when he was a child. He vividly remembered a whipping room with iron rings on the floor. The individual would be laid down, his hands and feet stretched out and fastened in the rings, and a great big man would stand over him and flog him. Newman also remembered Mary Lumpkin looking at him sadly after he was whipped. He said that it almost looked like she was saying, "You poor, poor child." In 1854, an enslaved man named Anthony Burns, who had escaped to Boston from Virginia, was captured and returned to the state because of the Fugitive Slave Act, sparking an abolitionist riot. Despite the public outcry in the North, Burns was sent to Lumpkin's jail for 4 months as punishment. According to Encyclopedia Virginia, he was confined to a tiny room that could only be entered through a trap door. He had no bed and instead slept on a, quote, rude bench fastened against the wall and a single coarse blanket. Anthony Burns met Mary Lumpkin while imprisoned at Lumpkin's jail. During the course of Burns' imprisonment, Mary Lumpkin allegedly sneaked a Bible and a hymnal into his cell in an effort to keep his spirits up. Although she was enslaved herself and held very little power, Mary did everything she could to help the prisoners who came through Robert's jail. And as soon as she had a chance, she shut it down for good. How Mary Lumpkin helped turn a slave jail into an HBCU. When Robert Lumpkin died in 1866, Mary and her children were living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where they'd moved when the Civil War broke out to avoid being captured and sold into slavery. Robert left the jail to Mary in his will, but she wanted nothing to do with it. So when she'd learned that an abolitionist minister named Nathaniel Culver was seeking a place to establish a seminary for formerly enslaved people, she gladly leased him the land. Workers tore apart the jail and its cells, removing the iron bars and chains to create classrooms. On the small patch of land where enslaved people had once been tortured, Black students began receiving an education at the Richmond Theological School for Freed Men. Charles Henry Corey declared, "The old slave pen was no longer the devil's half acre, but God's half acre." After several years, the school needed room to expand, and it moved to a different area of the city. Mary Lumpkin sold the property in 1873, and the jail was demolished in 1876. After living out the rest of her life as a free woman, Mary died in 1905 and was buried in New Richmond, Ohio. Eventually, the Richmond Theological School for Freed Men became Virginia Union University, which remains one of the oldest HBCUs in the country to this day. At its dedication in 1900, the university's president spoke of Mary's legacy. Lumpkin's jail, which had been the scene of some of the most heartless, saddest events in slavery, now became the set of theological instruction. The rings on the floor to which slaves had been chained gave place to school desks and bench. And in 2022, Virginia Union University President Hakeem J. Lucas said, quote, "For Virginia Union to have a forming story rooted in Black womanness is a story of its own." Mary Lumpkin literally helped to tear down some of slavery's dark legacy. This historical tribute was brought to you by Minister Rana and Baba Alaman Hale. Ashe.
Ashe.
Hey.
And that's what I call a superhero. How does anyone rise up from being enslaved to start a university? It's just phenomenal. This is why we keep this tradition. And now we'll have our litany of sacrifice led by Mama Akanke. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Brother Jeff has another song for us from Sounds of Ma'at. Ashe, Ashe, bringing us that beautiful mirror of the most beautiful people on the face of this earth. Thank you, thank you. And now we'll have our litany of sacrifice, now led by Mama Akanke and Baba Ustadi.
Greetings, good rising, we'll say family. It's so wonderful to see everyone. And being the time of our litany of sacrifice, you know, when we talk about sacrifice, we know that sacrifice is reciprocal and that we stand because someone has given for us to be here this day. And so we continue the practice of reciprocating. And at this time, we are talking about our tithes and offerings that help us to continue our work, to keep our building open, to keep our buildings open, to keep water running, lights on, and to keep a future ahead of us, because we have to make sure we have something in the bank for tomorrow's. So anyway, as we begin the litany, it says, "Save us, O Holy One, by your name. Vindicate us by your might. Hear my prayer, divine protector. Listen to the words of my mouth. How can we repay the Holy One for the gifts that have been given to us? We will lift up the cup of salvation and call upon the God of our ancestors. We will fulfill our vows to our Creator in the presence of all our people. Gladly, we bring our sacrifices to you. We praise your name, O Amun-Ra, for it is good." So, Umoja, unity. We shall strive to maintain unity in the family, community, nation, and race.
Kujichagulia, self-determination. We shall define, name, create, and speak for ourselves.
Ujima, collective work and responsibility. We shall build and maintain our communities together. Our brothers and sisters' problems shall be ours to solve together.
Ujamaa, cooperative economics. Together we shall build and maintain our own businesses and together profit from them.
Nia, purpose. We shall make our collective vocation the building and developing of our community and the restoration of our people to our traditional greatness.
Kuumba, creativity. We shall do as much as we can in any way we can to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than when we inherited.
Imani, faith. We will believe with all our hearts in our God, our people,
and in the righteous victory, in the righteous and victory of our struggle.
Ashe, Baba.
Ashe.
So will you, so on the screen, we have places where we can send our tithes and offerings to, both Oakland and Sacramento. So please take note of those. Thank you very much. And our beautiful Baba Ustadi is going to offer us prayer to close out our litany of sacrifice.
Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, thank you for our life, our health, and our strength. And thank you for the warm blood that runs through our veins this morning. Thank you for those who gave and those who helped us sustain our educational institution and grow our spiritual. Thank you for those who was not able to give. God knows your conditions and will bless you for it. So we say thank you for all that are present today and in the earsight ear sight. Is that right now? Ear.
Earshot.
Hearing shot. Hearing shot of the person who's going to give the message today. So I like to end by saying, Ashe, amen, Ashe, amen, Ashe, amen. So,
Ashe. Thank you, Baba.
Ashe.
welcome.
And now, for our message, we will hear from our academic leader. Professor Manu Ampem is here. Professor Manu?
Thank you, Brother Bill. Good morning, good afternoon, folks. Glad to be with you this morning just to share some ideas and a little bit of insight about the classical tradition in Kemet. And as you know, in the modern or the Gregorian calendar that we tend to use here in the U.S., at the end of December or 1st of January, a lot of people, they make resolutions. You know, they make New Year resolutions. I actually stopped that quite a bit ago. It's all about a new life resolution and looking at the much bigger picture as opposed to just a new year. And so I wanted to share some insight from Kemet about how they looked at the ideal life, the life that would be an example for everybody else. And associated with the ideal life is the ideal age. So what would be an ideal age that a person who lives an exemplary or ideal life, what would be the length of that life, that lifespan? So I want to share with you a little bit of how they saw that and what the ancestors presented as the model for everybody else in society. And you see it in a lot of different texts. And it's not just a regular life, but it's, you know, a spiritual life as well. I downloaded a new version of Zoom, and this thing is acting up. So let me see if I can go to the slides and show you. So I'm going to be brief with this, but I do want to introduce the topic to you so that we can all come away with something practical. So this is what I want to share in the few minutes that I have, and that is the ideal life in Kemet according to the wisdom text. It's the same wisdom text that we're pretty familiar with. So one of the canons in Wosei is the Hosea, and Hosea has some of the wisdom texts, or people call it didactic literature because it's literature that teaches a moral lesson or moral values. And then so at least we can come away with something practical from our own spiritual tradition. So of course, I really don't have to explain to you where Kemet is, but it's always important to make sure we get the geography straight, because as I see a lot of books and docudramas and phony museum displays, one of the things that's common is that they can't get a map straight. And if you can't get a map straight, you can't get history straight. So it's always important to make sure we have the right orientation. So this is what I want to share, some of the wisdom texts from Northeast Africa. And if we had more time, we could talk about Kush and the ideal age, but we want to stick to Kemet. And one of the other wisdom or the foundational books is by none other than Dr. Chancellor Williams. And as you see, he wrote, and this is one of his great quotes based on his firsthand research, but the greatest of all issues is right here in the general agreement that at the very earliest period known to mankind, an African civilization in the areas later called the Sudan in Egypt was what? Fully developed, with all the arts of civilized life already matured, its beginnings being placed so far back into the early history of the world that it is beyond the reach of man. In other words, the further we go back, the civilizations are already made. So it's hard to go back to the origins, but one of the things that helps us to go back into antiquity and know exactly what the ancestors were thinking, exactly what they did and how they organized society is the writing tradition. So we have to read the Medu Neter and look at the scribal or writing tradition. So you see in the art as well as artifacts, you see scribal equipment everywhere. So you see that this is one of the most important items that you can find in the archaeological record because it gives us a direct window into the past. It's exactly what the ancestors wrote. And of course, the scribe said that the most important of all of the disciplines was to become a writer. Well, they were writers, so they said that was the most important of all the jobs and duties. And so you see the scribal palette with the main colors of black and red, the reed brush, and you see the scribes doing their very important work. So we never have to guess about a lot of things because we can see it in the actual historical record, and they wrote to give us and anybody else who wants to read the original text the insight about what each scene is addressing. So the writer of the very first book in the history of humanity is none other than Ptahhotep, who wrote the 37 lessons on moral and ethical conduct. And it's one of the greatest textbooks on the historical record. It wasn't just a book, it was a textbook that was one of the foundational pillars for all of the instruction. And we know that because of the different versions found from the book of Ptahhotep. So it wasn't just one document, there were a number of them because it was apparently a fundamental text that was taught up and down Kemet. And when you see red, by the way, that means it's a new lesson. So the main text was black and red would be a new lesson. Or if it was, let's say, a mathematical text, the red would be a new problem. Or if it was a medical text, the red would be what? A new medical case. So you look for the red and you read it in that manner. But one of the things that's interesting about the wisdom of Ptahhotep and his leadership as the prime minister right under the Per-Ah, or the so-called pharaoh, is Ptahhotep lived a long life. And as an elder, Ptahhotep in his writing is saying that it is interesting how he words it. He says that old age has arrived. So he said, age is here. Old age has arrived, and he begins to describe oldness or elderliness, and that he was writing to say that his great work over the years, the many years, should now be passed on to his son. So he's writing to say that his son now should take over the mantle and continue his work because the eyes are dim now, and he doesn't, and he doesn't have the same faculties that he had in the past. And when you read books like this, you recognize that they understood the process of life and the aging process. And so despite the fact that this is the oldest complete textbook in the history of humanity, and it has great value, we also see Ptahhotep writing about the arc of life and how that comes about. So it's important to look at these kind of texts. And there's a number of texts that really discuss the ideal life and the ideal age. But Ptahhotep should be mentioned, particularly in the Wose setting, because we are already familiar with the book. We just want to make sure that we don't leave anything out about what he was presenting or teaching. And of course, one of the great of all of the different stanzas is stanza 21. And I have highlighted that to hear well and to listen well. This is a very important focus because the most common and the most written about verb in terms of so-called English, but the most important verb, the one that's written about the most, is sejum. So what does sejum mean? Sejum means to hear or to listen. It is the most common verb used because the wise man or woman is one who hears well. They listen well, and that if they're going to be valued and people are going to have weight and substance, then they must hear and listen well, and their speech will be informed by that. And the opposite of the wise person who hears or listens well is the ignorant person. They always present the ignoramus, the person who doesn't know anything. And that person who's ignorant, who doesn't know anything, is because they don't listen, and they make many mistakes, and they are discussed throughout the text, because a wise person is not wise out there by himself. A wise person is wise within a social context. So this is why the ancestors always juxtapose the wise man or woman against the ignorant person who should be avoided if one is going to be respected and live a respected life. So Ptah is one of many writers in this tradition of the wisdom text who discusses the value of hearing or listening. Now, this document, I didn't put the name there on purpose. I don't want to highlight the name of robbers and foreigners and those that have purchased African documents. And unfortunately, their names continue to be listed, and their names are highlighted anytime we're looking at African tradition, African history, and African culture. Most of the documents are named after the white guy that bought it. So you have people that have bought documents literally thousands of years after they were written by Africans, and then the documents are named after the man that bought it, or they're named after the institution that houses it. So there's lots of distortions. But this is the so-called Nsinger papyrus, and this, because it's named after the man Nsinger, but it's important because this is actually the largest of all of the wisdom texts or the didactic literature. This is the largest of all. It's about 800 or so maxims or wise sayings and 25 different chapters. So this is much larger even than the first book written by Ptah. And this was written during the foreign period. It would not have been created when foreigners came. This would have been copied, and some could have probably added on to it. But this is when the foreigners, when the Greek and Romans were around, you have this important document. It's one of the most significant documents because of the vast amount of wise sayings, of wisdom texts, or the great insight about designs for life. How do you show wisdom in social relationships? This papyrus, which is written in Demotic, which is simply a cursive form of Medu Neter. This is cited by those who either read the Demotic or the very cursive script, or if it's been translated for them. But I wanted to share this with you because of the ideal life that's embedded in this papyrus, that is among other papyrus, but this one is very comprehensive about the ideal life. So I want to share this with you. So the ideal life for the wise man or woman, and you have Jehuti on the left, and he's the one that is the great, the one over the library. He's the one that makes the important recordings at the important initiation ceremony or the weighing of the heart. So this is how they lay out, the ancestors lay out the phases of the ideal life. And they start off to say the life that approaches the peak, 2/3 are lost. Now for them, the peak of life, as they write in this particular papyrus, is 60 years. That's the peak. It's not the end of life, it's just the peak. It's the apex. It's about 60 years, and they say 2/3 are lost. So in other words, at about the age 40, you have a long way to go. You got to get up to 40 to learn the important things that you need to know, that one needs to know about life. So when they write that at the peak, at about the age 60, 2/3 are lost, that means you got to go through about 40 years to get to a point where you now become a wise person, or you should become a wise person. And they actually go through the different decades that accumulates or adds up to this ideal life. But that's what they start off to say, that 2/3 are lost, meaning that 40 years it takes for you to get to a certain point. So in this document, they write he also meaning she, but he spends 10 years as a child before he understands death and life. Those are those early years. Some of us, we can remember events that maybe when we were 5, or if it was something quite dramatic or traumatic, maybe you can remember years earlier than that. But 5 or 6, we can certainly, in most cases, remember that. But up to the age of 10, the ancestors say that's the time period that it takes to really understand death and life, because things happen in life. And when one is young, they're naive and they don't understand that basic process, that death can occur. And we know that. Most of us, who are with us this morning, we have some age with us. So we understand that, but they're indicating what are those phases in life. So the first 10 years, a person's a child. Notice what they write. And by the way, the author of the text is not known. It's not known who the author was. So that's why I did not give that to you. But notice the second decade or second 10 years, he spends another 10 years doing what? Acquiring the instruction by which he or she will be able to live. So after 10, so 11 through 20, one is now acquiring important instruction. So think about that in our modern society. Think about the African Children's Advanced Studying Center or Ile Omade or any other independent school, and what we're teaching the young people. The ancestors say is to allow them to acquire the instruction by which he will be able to live. It makes sense. That's pretty much what we do as well. We're giving critical instruction in key areas. And but obviously it doesn't stop there. So there's another 10-year period. And the text says he spends another 10 years gaining and earning possessions by which to live. So now one is establishing a career, is going out and working, leaving the nest, as they say, to go out and make a life and pursue a mission in life and pursue a direction, pursue a discipline that they are excited about or have an opportunity to work in. They're pursuing a career. And so he spends 10 years gaining and earning these possessions by which to live. They go out, they get a house, they do those things that are required when one is making a family and developing a career in different, whatever discipline he or she may choose. So obviously this is the first 30 years. So remember the first bullet point, that the life that approaches the peak, 2/3 are lost. So here now, the fourth decade here, the ancestors say what? He spends another 10 years up to old age before, I love this, his heart takes counsel. How about that? It's the heart that's now the counselor. So Africans were clear that the heart was the center of intelligence. The heart is what one perceives by. It is the heart that was crucial and critical. And this is why when one was embalmed, what did they do? They would take the brain out and through the nose and throw the brain out as really waste material. Obviously it has function, but they did not see that as an important part of keeping it in the body. But what does stay in the body, and which is shown symbolically on the scale, is the heart. So heart is a center of wisdom. It's a center of intelligence. One perceives with their heart. You can tell when somebody's heart is not in it. It's about the heart. You can see through somebody's eyes, the way their expressions, their contours on their face, if the heart is in it or not. But it's about the heart being the counselor. This now is 40 years. So after this point, according to the ideal life, this is when wisdom takes place. They put it at 40 years. So a person now is in the realm of those who should become and act wise. They give wise counsel, and they list this in this manner in order to give the sequence of being a child up until when the heart takes counsel and one becomes a wise counselor, a wise practitioner. And this is very, very significant, because you have foreigners who write that the average age was that someone lived was much younger than this. It doesn't make any sense. You have examples of people living or ruling, for example, actually ruling for almost 70 years, or rulers ruling more than 90 years. And people living much older than what the foreigners say. Foreigners say, oh, the average age was 35 or 40. Based on what? You know, documentation beats conversation. You can't just throw something like that out there and think that we're going to believe it. Not at all. But the heart takes counsel in this fourth decade. But take a look at what happens after this. Didn't they say, and this is verbatim, by the way, I'm quoting all of this, the ancestors write, there remains 60 years of the whole life which Jehuti, the deity of wisdom, has assigned to the man of God, man or woman of God. So how many years is this then if we count it up?
100.
It's 100. Yeah, so this here counts as 100. Now, this particular papyrus has 100, but there are many others where it's not 100, it's 110. Like, you know, there's different stories. There's one of the great priests, the Sesh-per-Ankh, or scribe of the house of life. And there's a man named Jedi during the Pyramid Age, during the time of Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid in Giza. And there's a story about Jedi who comes and he has tremendous powers as a priest. And one of the girls was entertaining Khufu on a boat on the Nile, and guess what? She lost her jewelry. And when she lost her jewelry, Jedi said, not to fear, no problem. I got everybody, hang back, stand back, I got it. Jedi then parts the Nile, literally, he parts the water, reaches down and grabs the jewelry because he was such a powerful man. But the text says that Jedi comes into this scenario at 110 years old. And he still possesses all of these great powers. So 100 in this case here with this papyrus that I'm showing you, but 110 is described very, very often. But these are the sequences of an ideal life as they saw it. And they consistently present this because they understood that one must have these benchmarks in life. And so age of 40, they say that, 2/3 are lost. So it takes you up to 40 years to begin to get to the point where you're a respected elder, where the heart is the counselor, not somebody that is hot-headed or somebody that got wrong thoughts or wrong thinking on things. No, it's the heart that becomes the counselor, the seat of wisdom. And at that point, it's the next 60 years or more, where is Jehuti, who's assigned to the man or woman of God this favor, this extra 6 decades, in some cases 7 decades. So it's in Kemet, the ideal life, the ideal lifespan is 110 years old. In most cases, this papyrus 100 years old. You might say that's a bit much. No, not at all. If you go further south, it was stated numerous times that the people of Kush, the average age was, or the ideal age was 120. But nevertheless, this is the sequence that one should follow and have as a series of benchmarks in order that the heart takes counsel for most of their life if they live the ideal life. And so they saw that if anyone that lived longer than those few years, then Jehuti has bestowed favor on them. And this is not simply just words. We have a lot of documents that indicate that there were people who were highly respected and that there were counselors. And then they became those ancestors who were called an Akh, A-K-H, an Akh. Well, what do you mean? An Akh was an ancestor in Kemet. Now, a lot of times we just say ancestor and make it general. In Kemet, they were more specific. So yes, one passes on, they can become they'll become an ancestor, or they could be a ghost. It depends on, that haunts people, depends on their life, if it was positive, and if there was proper ceremony and ritual to send them to the spirit realm. But those who are the highest realm of ancestors were called an Akh. An Akh was somebody that the people in the living realm respected because they lived an ideal life. This was somebody that was highly respected, that lived the best tradition and the traditions and the best values in Kemet. And there is a whole category of materials called letters to the ancestors, that they literally would write letters to these ancestors, the Akh. They would write because they wanted the Akh to help with settling disputes. They wanted these powerful ancestors to assist with the birth of a healthy baby. They wrote to the ancestors to plead with them to make sure that the Nile overflows and that we have enough of the water to irrigate the crops. It's the Akh that is the one that also can cause misfortune. The text tells us that if one does not respect an Akh by keeping a shrine, then that is a cause for possible misfortune. And so when we read the text, it says that people wrote to the Akh to find out why are they receiving misfortune and how can the Akh help? And you know what? They got a response. And in a response, in some cases, the Akh said that you have forgotten my memory. And so therefore misfortune has come to you. And then what do they have to do? They have to then set up the shrine, if it's not already set up, and perform ritual and ceremony. And there is one location where you actually see altars in the homes where they honored both the male and female ancestors in each particular family. And so everyone was expected to live this ideal life. That was the ideal. This is what was presented. This was expected. This was presented as a pathway to follow. And in the society, there's a town called Deir el Medina. Deir el Medina, that's the modern name, but the name during the time of the ancestors was called Set Ma'at. You see Ma'at here, but Set Ma'at, S-E-T, or just S-T, Set Ma'at. It simply meant the place of truth. So the place of truth was actually the name of the town, the city. How about that for a name where people live? You don't think that that's an incentive for people to live right and do right? Of course it was. Every time somebody went to that special place, they were going back every day to Set Ma'at, or the place of truth. And we have a lot of court cases from Set Ma'at. And in the court cases, guess who ruled? Guess who was in charge? Ma'at. Ma'at was the symbol of authority in those court cases. And so this is a community during the time of Seti, the first, the 19th dynasty, around that time period, 13th century or so BCE, and you have people who are living the best of the tradition. And so you have a full-blown insight about these traditions, about the tradition of right order and justice, and to see people be able to live in the community and to strive to embrace and manifest the ideal life. Why not? I mean, what do we see as an ideal life now? Do people even conceive of that? Folks, sometimes, you know, they may joke about their age, and it's amazing in this society that people will often say, oh my God, like somebody the other day was a little bit embarrassed because, quote unquote, they dated themselves. I said, well, why not? If you're a person of wisdom and weight, then why wouldn't you establish the fact that you've been around a while and that what you say has weight because you have the longevity of life, that your heart is has taken over as your counselor. But in this society, you know, it's about deceit and people disrespecting eldership, disrespecting those that have lived a exemplary life. So therefore they they work hard not to date themselves. It should be the other way around. One should strive to be a respected elder. One should strive to be one who's living an ideal life, a life that's an exemplary life. And that's why we have respected elders versus people who are just older. There's a difference between an older person and an elder. They're not the same. They never have been. An older person just lives a little bit longer than other people, but that's not the same as a revered and respected elder who has lived the best of the traditions. And so you see Ma'at operating in everyday life in a very important manner. So if we go back to this sequence of years, these decades, it gives us a lot of understanding and design. And of course, we know from experience, and they also say that neither the impious man or the fool is one who doesn't listen. The fool never seems to get it. And they always jam up and expose the foolish person who does not read. They don't know very much. And they juxtapose that impious person who has no respect for the divine. They don't respect their parents. So they're a foolish person who's headed towards destruction. And this is how the wisdom text contrasts this kind of person with the godly man or woman. But we know that we cannot alter the lifespan or lifetime that was assigned to us. So we have to live the best in our traditions, and that's what's laid out in this sequence of the ideal life. This is always presented. It is not presented only sometimes. No, these were texts that were taught all the time, so everybody would understand, regardless. Once they begin to get instructions, and they can begin to understand more about life after they get past this first stage of death and life and begin to understand, these texts are taught. The foreigners call them schoolboy texts. They're not just schoolboy, they're schoolboy and schoolgirl texts. These are texts that are taught in the educational system in Kemet, which was tied into the temple. So the Per'Ankh, or the house of life, everything took place there. It was not only a healing center, but the Per'Ankh was where the books were manufactured. It's where the library was kept. The Per'Ankh was also where detailed instruction took place. And this is all along the way. This is how they develop and cultivate character. People say, oh yeah, being a young person is really hard. It's not just at the young person, at any stage, because you have a role to play. You're looking at the big picture, the ideal life. This is what's presented in Kemet, that your life has to be accounted for. What are you going to do? What's going to be your role and your contribution? And that's why the ideal life is presented, because it's not just when we're here. What is our legacy? Not just our individual legacy, but what is the legacy with processes, programs, institutions that outlive us? That's what's significant. So we're here, whether it's at WOSE or any other place. What's going to be our legacy? What will people be able to not only remember about you and about us, but what would be the concrete legacy that everybody is positively influenced by because of our contribution? This is the big picture, where we're looking at a new life resolution. And the big picture is that what contribution am I making in my physical life, and how am I impacting people around me? So when I'm looking at this kind of papyrus and this kind of detailed description about the different stages in life, it cannot be anything other than a design for living. We don't have to try to catch up with some outrageous foreigners who are masquerading as some leaders in this society. They don't know nothing about nothing when we have a tradition. So when we are in a condition as we are as African people, either we never had a tradition and we were always second-class citizens, second-class folks depending on somebody else, or we had a way and we lost our way. That's what happened to us. We lost our way. So in WOSE and other similar communities and collective efforts is to re-embrace our way, the way. And how do we do that? We must look at our traditional institutions and values and the ideal life, the ideal mother, the ideal father, the ideal community. This is why we look at Set Ma'at, because we have a full-blown view of a living community that went on for generations, with hundreds of homes that are still a part of the remains that we can look and examine and learn from. So I just wanted to share with you these few things, this idea about the ideal life for the man and woman, because what could be more practical than somebody living a life of purpose? And that starts at a very young age, because it's not just up to the parents, it's up to the community to make sure that we are directing and correcting behavior, and that we know from a very early age what is the destination of this young person, that we've already done the reading, we've done the charts, we know exactly what their orientation is and how we can help facilitate that, as opposed to asking somebody when they're a teenager, well, what do you want to do? Or what do you want to be? And then have no clue on how to help direct them or create the opportunity for them to be successful in what it is they want to do. So the ideal life, you have it laid out, is right there, because this is what the ancestors wrote, and they wrote it in different texts, but this one is absolutely very, very clear. And so I just want to end by saying that, and to say that, I'm taking a group to Kemet this summer. And then also we have a training seminar as well that is 3 parts, and some of you have already joined it. But I want to stop there and just say that I appreciate your time. And so the ideal life in Kemet, who's going to join me and embrace our ideal life? This is Professor Manu Mpim. Ashe.
Ashe. Ashe. And Thank you, Professor Ampim.
Asante
Sana.
Yes.
Very,
Excellent.
very critical information.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
always, always.
I say,
Pleasure
thank
to
you,
have
Baba.
him.
He is on his pathway.
Mr. Malik, are you here? You're going to welcome a few more to the way, the Wose
Absolutely.
way.
Absolutely.
Please come forward.
First, I want to say, let's give Professor Manu a black hand for that beautiful presentation. Now, you know, Wose, I see normally to have access to this type of knowledge, you would have to pay for some highfalutin conference. But we have a residence professor in our midst. Always, when he speaks, grab a notebook and something to write with, because you are going to get primary research that is science-based. He's compassionate about what he speaks about. It's just such a blessing. Now, I know most of you see some of you youngsters under 40. Professor Manu just told you, well, not me, but you have a long way still to go. 110 years, the ideal life. I mean, every time I'm in the presence of Professor Manu, I always learn something new and something that's vital and something that's important. But I know you can kind of hear me preach. We'll say, this is the time in our service where we extend an opportunity to join our Wose community. Even though today's service is concluding, the opportunity to join is always open. So if you were inspired by our service, if you were moved by the message that you just heard, or you just want to worship and fellowship and work, emphasis on work, with like-minded, beautiful Black people, then Wose is that place. And we ask at this time that, you raise your hand or raise your voice, or you can put your intentions in our chat and someone will reach out to you. So if you're ready to join today, or raise your hand or lift your voice to be recognized. And as I said, you can also put your contact information in the chat and someone will reach out to you. But this has been a beautiful service, like all of our services are. We hope that you felt something that makes you want to be a part of this community. And so I don't see any hands as of yet, but like I said, you can also join at any time. Also, I'll just, wait, I'm sorry. I had to take a swig of water. I suffer from dry mouth and I'm losing my voice. Excuse me. And so in closing, as we always do, community, if you would repeat after me, we are one people.
We are one people.
Having one God.
One God.
Having one God.
One love.
One love.
One faith.
One faith.
One faith.
One destiny.
One
destiny.
What happened to the song?
We're gonna get to the song.
We'll get to the song. We always gonna end on our national anthem, but let us call the name of that one God for countless generations. Amen Ra.
Amen Ra.
We, you,
we,
me, us. We are the
most
beautiful
people
on the face
of this earth.
On the face of this earth.
Ashe,
Ashe. Ashe. Ashe.
Back to you, Minister.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven rings. Ring with the harmony of liberty. liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the glistening sky. Let it resound loud as the rolling seas. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. March on with Amin Ra. March on in the spirit of March. March on with September power every day, every hour. And let's do all we can for truth and justice throughout this land. The sacred African way. Uncle Johnson, Nip Ashe. March on, march on with Amin Ra.
Ashe, Minister, your version is absolutely amazing. And I've actually almost learned it. Not quite, but almost. It's amazing.
Amin Ra, Ashe.
All right. What a beautiful service. You know what? We used to say this. I don't know if it's still true. Maybe you guys can help me. You are the most beautiful people on the face of this earth. So I really mean that inside and out. When I look at you, you are uplifting people. You carry the spirit of the Most High with you wherever you go. And people are uplifted being around you, I'm sure. I want to thank Professor Manu for giving us wise instruction today. He is truly a Seba, a doorway, a star that lights the way and gives us the truth and light. Want to thank
as young as he is.
As young as he is. I know. He's a young man. That's true.
Count him by the tens.
That's true. Baba Jeff, those were great videos of David. Those are great songs that Baba Jeff put together. So you guys working together did a great collaboration. Minister Rana, thank you for introducing someone that we had no knowledge of prior. It was a great historical tribute, and all of us coming together to worship together and fellowship together as one people.